Though Celaena didn't want to admit it, Ansel was right. She did run further the next day, and the day after that, and the one following that.
Come on!
But it still took her so long to get back, that she didn't have time to seek out the master. Not that she could. He'd send for her, like a lackey. She did manage to find some time later in the afternoon to attend drills with Ansel. The only guidance she received there was from a few older-looking assassins, who positioned her hands and feet, tapped her stomach, and slapped her spine into correct posture. Occasionally, Elias would train alongside her. Never too close, but close enough for her to know his presence was more than coincidental. Like the assassins in Ardalan, the silent assassins weren't known for any skill in particular, save the uncannily quiet way they moved. But just watching them, it seemed that there was a good deal less viciousness here. Arobin encouraged cutthroat behaviour. Even when they were children, he'd set her and Sam against each other, use their victories and failures against them. He'd made her see everyone but himself and Ben as a potential enemy. As allies, yes, but also as foes to be closely watched. Weakness was never to be shown at any cost. Brutality was rewarded, and education and culture were equally important. Words could be just as deadly as steel. But the silent assassins, though they too might be killers, they looked to one another for learning, embraced collective wisdom. Older warriors smiled as they taught the acolytes. Seasoned assassins swapped techniques. And while they were all competitors, it appeared that an invisible link bound them together. Something that had brought them to this place at the end of the earth. More than a few, she discovered, were actually mute from birth. But all of them seemed full of secrets. As if the fortress and what it offered somehow held the answers they sought. As if they could find whatever they were looking for in the silence. Still, even as they corrected her posture and showed her new ways to control her breathing, she tried her best not to snarl at them. She knew plenty. She wasn't Ardalan's assassin for nothing. But she needed that letter of good behaviour as proof of her training. These people might be called upon by the Mute Master to give an opinion of her. Perhaps if she demonstrated that she was skilled enough in these practices, the Master might take notice of her. She'd get that letter, even if she had to hold a dagger to his throat while he wrote it. The attack by Lord Berik happened on her 5th night. There was no moon, and Celaena had no idea how the silent assassin spotted the 30 or so soldiers creeping across the dark dunes. Mikhail had burst into their room and whispered to come to the fortress battlements.
I need you both to come with me, now.
Hopefully, this would turn out to be another opportunity to prove herself. With just over 3 weeks left, she was running out of options. But the Master wasn't at the battlements, and neither were many of the assassins. She heard a woman question another, asking how Berik's men had known a good number of the assassins would be away that night, busy escorting some foreign dignitary back to the nearest port. It was too convenient to be coincidental. Crouched atop the parapet, an arrow knocked into her bow, Celaena peered through one of the crenels in the wall. Ansel squatted beside her, also twisting to look. Up and down the battlements, assassins hid in the shadows of the wall, clothed in black and with bows in hand. At the centre of the wall, Elias knelt, his hands moving quickly as he conveyed orders down the line. It seemed more like the silent language of soldiers than basic gestures used to represent the common tongue.
Get your arrows ready,
Ansel murmured, dipping her cloth-covered arrow tip into the small bowl of oil between them.
When Elias gives the signal, light it on the torch as fast as you can and fire. Aim for the ridge in the sand, just below the soldiers.
Celaena glanced into the darkness beyond the wall. Rather than give themselves away by extinguishing the lights of the fortress, the defenders had kept them on, which made focusing in the dark nearly impossible. but she could still make out the shapes against the starlit sky. 30 men on their stomachs, poised to do whatever they had planned. Attack the assassins outright, murder them in their sleep, burn the place to the ground. "We're not going to kill them?" Celaena whispered back. She weighed her weapon in her hands. The bow of the silent assassins was different. Shorter, thicker, harder to bend. Ansel shook her head, watching Elias down the line.
No, though I wish we could.
Celaena didn't particularly care for the casual way she said it, but Ansel went on.
We don't have to start an all-out battle with Lord Berik. We just need to scare him off. Mikhail and Elias rigged that ridge last week. The line in the sand is a rope soaked in a trough of oil.
Celaena was beginning to see where this was going. She dipped her arrow into the dish of oil, drenching the cloth around it thoroughly. "That's going to be a long wall of fire," she said, following the course of the ridge.
You have no idea. It stretches around the whole fortress.
Ansel straightened, and Celaena glanced over her shoulder to see Elias's arm make a neat, slicing motion. Instantly, they were on their feet. Ansel reached the torch in the nearby bracket before Celaena did, and was at the battlements a heartbeat later, swift as lightning. Celaena nearly dropped her bow as she swiped her arrow through the flame, and the heat bit her fingers. Lord Berik's men started shouting, and over the crackle of the ignited arrows, Celaena heard twangs as soldiers fired their own ammunition. But Celaena was already at the wall, wincing as she drew the burning arrow back far enough for it to singe her fingers. She fired. Like a wave of shooting stars, their flaming arrows went up, 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 then dropped. But Celaena didn't have time to see the ring of fire erupt between the soldiers and the fortress. She ducked against the wall, throwing her hands over her head. Beside her, Ansel did the same. Light burst all around them, and the roar of the wall of flame drowned out the hollering of Lord Berik's men. Black arrows rained from the sky, ricocheting off the stones of the battlements. 2 or 3 assassins grunted, swallowing their screams, but Celaena kept her head low, holding her breath until the last of the enemy's arrows had fallen. Then there was nothing but the muffled moaning of the injured assassins. Celaena dared to look at Ansel. The girl's eyes were bright.
Well, wasn't that fun?
Ansel breathed. Celaena grinned, her heart racing. Oh, yes. Pivoting, she spied Lord Berik's men fleeing back across the dunes. Yes, it was. Near dawn, when Celaena and Ansel were back in their room, a soft knocking sounded. Ansel was instantly on her feet, and opened the door only wide enough for Celaena to spy Mikhail on the other side. He handed Ansel a sealed scroll.
You're to go to Exandria today and give him this.
Celaena saw Ansel's shoulders tense.
Master's orders.
He added. She couldn't see Ansel's face as she nodded, but Celaena could have sworn Mikhail brushed her cheek before he turned away. Ansel let out a long breath and shut the door. In the growing light of the pre-dawn, Celaena saw Ansel wipe the sleep from her eyes.
Care to join me?
Celaena hoisted herself up onto her elbows. Isn't that 2 days from here?
Yes. 2 days through the desert with only yours truly to keep you company. Unless you'd rather stay here, running every day and waiting like a dog for the master to notice you. In fact, coming with me might help get him to consider training you. He'd certainly see your dedication to keeping us safe.
Ansel wriggled her eyebrows at Celaena, who rolled her eyes. It was actually sound reasoning. What better way to prove her dedication than to sacrifice 4 days of her precious time in order to help the silent assassins? It was risky, yes, but it might be bold enough to catch his attention. And what will we be doing in Xandria?
That's for you to find out.
From the mischief twinkling in Ansel's red-brown eyes, Celaena could only wonder what might await them.